Hello and welcome back to the Death Row and Executions channel. My name is Paco Rivera and I do presentations on executions happening soon, including a backstory on what got the condemned death row inmate sentenced to death. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more death row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. Also, check out my other channel here on YouTube called The Maximum Sentence, where I cover a recent crime and conviction. There will also be a link for that. Well, the crime I'm going to talk about today is yet another crime that happened in a store. In this case, the business was a grocery store, and the victim was someone working in that store who lost her life in a violent crime. In this case, she was also the owner of the store, and once again, the crime was fueled by drugs. A drug-addicted killer, extremely high on drugs and needing more. As a matter of fact, one of the arguments that defense lawyers used was that the defendant was under the influence of extreme mental and emotional disturbance. In other words, in this case, extremely high on crack cocaine and needing more, with his lawyers trying to say that the defendant was unable to distinguish between right and wrong. Virgie Langford was born Virgie Campbell in Georgia in the year 1916. The family moved to the city of Palmetto in Florida in the year 1925 when Virgie was just 9 years old. When Virgie was 17 years old, she married a man named Leroy Langford, originally from Florida, who was more than twice her age. He was 35. Leroy operated a grocery store in Palmetto, Florida. Leroy and Virgie would continue to operate that grocery store together for decades until Virgie and Leroy divorced in the year 1970. And then Virgie ran that store on her own, alone, for the next 16 years until she was killed in 1986. Virgie was operating that store on her own, working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Her ex-husband Leroy had died 2 years earlier at the age of 85 in 1984. By that time, Virgie was 68 years old, and together they had 4 children, 10 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren at the time of Leroy's death. This beautiful home that they shared together during their marriage is a short distance away from the grocery store, actually located in Bradenton, Florida. That house was built in 1928 and remains standing to this day. Virgie was well liked in the community because of her generosity. She allowed people to run credit on groceries and to just pay her when they get their paycheck. And in many cases, she fed people from the store that were down on their luck. According to Virgie's children, she had been robbed 3 times over the years before she was killed. And she had said that it was because of people needing drugs. Her children tried convincing her to sell the store, but she always refused. 2 years after Leroy died, now the year 1986, Virgie Langford, now 70 years old, was inside her store called Langford Grocery Store in Palmetto, Florida. These recent images show what this store looked like today. That same structure also still remains. Anyway, it was June 16, 1986, and Virgie was inside her store cutting some meats behind a deli counter. It was about 2:45 in the afternoon when a man entered the store, who would later be identified as 25-year-old Melvin Lee Trotter. And there was talk that he was extremely under the influence of crack cocaine. Strangely, Trotter was wearing, at the time, some kind of work uniform with an employment ID tag hanging from his chest. Now, Trotter did not see Virgie over there cutting meats, so he made his way around a counter to the register and began removing food stamps and cash from the register. Now, the investigation concluded that at some point, Virgie spotted Trotter, and there was a confrontation that began by the register, where Trotter strangled Virgie and then stabbed her 7 times. During the struggle, Virgie saw that Trotter was wearing an employment ID tag with the name Melvin on it. But at this point, Trotter probably doesn't care if Virgie can see the ID badge he was wearing, because she won't be alive to tell anybody about it. Or he is so high on crack cocaine that he doesn't realize he's committing this crime in his work uniform with his name hanging from his chest. Virgie Langford was transported to a hospital where she died later that night after succumbing to the injuries that she had sustained. Melvin Trotter had ran away from the store, where he was actually seen by several witnesses that would later give a description to authorities. Meanwhile, a truck driver parked his truck by the store and went inside. He didn't see anyone at first, and when he walked around the store looking for someone, he came upon Virgie Langford lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and she was still alive. She told the truck driver that she had been robbed and stabbed with a knife, and when authorities arrived at the store, she told them that the man who attacked her was wearing a work uniform, and he had a Tropicana orange juice plant employee ID badge with the name Melvin on it. Bingo! Case closed. What a dummy. Meanwhile, Trotter later met up with a woman named Eleanor Oates, who would testify at his trial. Eleanor stated that Trotter approached her and told her that he has food stamps and cash, and to take him to where he can buy some crack cocaine. And that's what she did. She took him and then later also accompanied Trotter back to his mother's house. They both spent the rest of the day smoking crack cocaine and watching television. When Eleanor asked how he got the money, as she would later testify, Trotter told her that he got the cash and food stamps as payment for some work that he had done for someone. The total taken from the store before buying the crack cocaine was approximately $100 in cash and $30 in food stamps. A woman was killed for $130. Investigators visited the Tropicana juice plant and provided a name and description of who they were looking for. And after that, the manhunt was on. As it turned out, it just so happened that police were already looking for Melvin Trotter, even before the murder. And he was found and arrested on a violation of probation warrant. So when detectives learned that he was already in custody for something else, they went to question him at the jailhouse. My guess is that he was probably wondering how in the world anyone knew that it was him who robbed the store and killed the lady inside. Anyway, he knew the jig was up, and when he was questioned, he confessed to everything he had done. Of course, blaming it all on the drugs and what it did to his head. And if he had denied it, police also had his handprint on a meat cooler behind the counter of the store, and when his home was searched, they found bloody clothing with blood matching that of the victim, Virgie Langford. The following year, in 1987, Trotter was found guilty and sentenced to death. A few years later, he filed an appeal stating that his defense lawyers were not allowed to excuse some jurors during jury selection of his trial, and a court agreed on the appeal. So his sentence was thrown out, and a new jury to his liking was selected. It didn't work. In 1993, during a new sentencing hearing, he was sentenced to death again. Melvin Lee Trotter was 25 years old when he killed Virgie Langford. At his execution this year, on February 24, he will be 65 years old. That crime happened 40 years ago. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button for more death row and upcoming execution stories so that you're alerted when the next one comes out. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. My name is Paco Rivera. Thank you for watching. Take care and bye for now.